What's going on, y'all? It's JD Piquel. Today on the Hard Count, we're going to talk about why the Big 12 and Pac-12 should merge together. First things first, we say it every video, you're going to want to subscribe to this channel. I'm just telling you, it's college football 24/7, content you can't get anywhere else, and it's only going to ramp up come the season. So go ahead, click the subscribe button. We're going to keep on rolling. So as it stands right now, there is absolute chaos in realignment, okay? The Big 12 is left with 8 teams. At the latest 2025, I think it'll be a lot earlier with Oklahoma and Texas choosing to jump ship. So right now where we find ourselves is a crazy game of musical chairs. And one storyline that's been slowly developing and has had some legitimate reports behind is the Big 12 approaching the Pac-12 or being in conversations with the Pac-12 about a merger. It's like, hey, let's team up. Scratch your back, you scratch our back, you give us a place to stay, we'll give you some bills that we can help pay. And musical chairs, to me, feels like the exact right metaphor because it benefits both of these entities if you were to have a merge. Like, I'm very much for this. And right now, like I said, musical chairs is kind of where we're at. The music is playing. The Big 12 and the Pac-12 are both circling these chairs, and there's not enough chairs for everybody. Someone's going to get left out in the cold because in this Super League era that we are entering into, it's going to be exclusively Super League. So if you're not a Super League, you're going to be left out in the cold financially, probably from a competitive standpoint too with the expanded playoff. There's only going to be room for the big boys. And so if you're the Big 12 and you join forces with the Pac-12 to make a 20-team conference, you are effectively one of the big boys. And so I use the musical chairs reference because if you're the Big 12, you can't have 8 teams and be relevant. Like, that's just not a reality for you. You can't be the Big 8. Those days are long, long gone. And so if you want to have a seat at the table, join forces with the Pac-12, have brands like USC, brands like Stanford, UCLA. USC is one of the top 25, if not one of the top 15 TV markets, or in terms of the viewers they get. Like, they are a big national brand. You want to have them. You want to be associated with them. And same thing for the Pac-12. You got TCU and Oklahoma State being the top 25 in terms of viewers per week. Sounds like a win-win to me when viewers are driving the whole deal. And then if you're the Pac-12, I don't think that you can even have just 12 teams in this era. I really don't. With the SEC saying, hey, we're going to go with 16 teams. Go. Top that. I think that's going to be the number that we stick to, 16 if not more. And so if you're the Pac-12, you got to add some teams. So your options are going to add some group of 5 teams, a Memphis, SMU, I don't even know who else you add. Houston. Ideally, you get some independents, but I think that's going to be a hard get. So for the Pac-12, you have this perfect life raft coming your way of 8 teams that are all Power 5 caliber, and they are looking for a place to go. So you want to make a splash as the Pac-12? Add them, because if you don't add the Big 12, you don't add those 8 teams, I don't know where a better option is going to come from. I don't know there's a better solution for you. You know, the old saying, 1 in the hand versus 2 in the bush. I don't think there's 2 in the bush. I think you just have 1 in the hand. So you better grab on tight for dear life and not let that go because you're going to need this. This is the way that college football is trending, all right? If it makes sense, then it makes sense. You feel me? The second thing is you want to avoid being the JV league for both of these entities, the Pac-12 and the Big 12. And so let's just start with the Pac-12. They have been, for the most part, viewed as the lesser of the Power 5 programs. Obviously, Oregon had a run that was really impressive with Mariota. Washington got to the playoff and got slapped around by Alabama. But the Pac-12 is bordering on, I don't want to say irrelevant, but less relevant, okay? We can say that. They're less relevant as it stands for all of the conferences right now. For the Big 12, you're in the same scenario. You can't be relevant, again, with 8 teams. You got to add somebody. And so if you're the Big 12, same situation as the Pac-12 with adding teams. You could add the group of 5 schools. You probably have to add somewhere around 6, I would guess. I don't think 12 puts you at a competitive number. So again, you add the Memphises, the UCFs. I don't think independence is really gettable at this point in time. And so if you do that, sure, your conference is whole. Maybe you find a way to find that Oklahoma and Texas-sized hole and you're able to fill that with those teams. But even then, half your conference is then made up of group of 5 programs. And that carries with it the perception of, okay, this is still a conference that exists, but it's substantially less competitive. We don't want to play the Memphises. We don't want to play the Houstons. We don't want to play the SMUs week in and week out. We want to play the USCs. We want to play the UCLAs, the Stanfords, the national TV games. We'll play those games. But if you got Memphis in your corner, you're playing them week in and week out, I mean, when it comes time for college football playoff selection, even if you do expand to 12, I think your case becomes a lot harder to make. And so that's one thing that you got to do. You got to avoid being that JV league because nobody wants to end up that way. You end up being the JV league, you're probably going to end up on the outside looking in, again, financially and from a competitive standpoint. It's just not what you want to do. And so for the Big 12, when your options are either dissolve as a whole and everyone goes their own way, which could work. It's a lot less seamless than adding your entire conference to the Pac-12. It could work. Or just completely adding 6 teams and trying to be group of 5, or just transitioning to the Pac-12. Feels like the choice is pretty clear here. What's the most efficient and what's like just purely the safest choice. Like the safest choice to get on board with a team that, or a conference, I should say, that's already fairly established. And so lastly, and this is something we've been hitting on for the majority of this video, relevance, right? The Pac-12 has been messing around with irrelevance for a while now. So you add 8 teams, you become the Pac-20, the Big 20, whatever you want to call it. We're taking suggestions for names here. Go ahead and comment your name for this new conference below. You immediately, I don't know if you one up the SEC in terms of, brand, prestige, competitiveness, TV viewings, because I think the SEC is probably in a league of its own as it stands right now. But if you add 20 teams and one up them in terms of, size of conference, that's huge. You're probably at least in that 2 spot. And if you're in that 2 spot for the Pac-12 and the Big 12, that's uncharted territory for you for the most part, in recent history at least. Like that is a big deal for you financially, competitively, which is what this whole thing is around, right? Financially is the big player in this game, and then competitive aspect is secondary, which I hate, but it's just kind of the reality of this because this isn't the conversation about college football as much. And that's why we don't like this. So that's another video for another time. This is a conversation about dollars and cents. It's a business perspective. The guys making this call aren't head coaches. They're not players. It's guys that have dealt with MGM resorts. It's guys that have a background in sports media. It's all these different careers that are sort of meeting together and making decisions. And so if you're going to have a 20-team conference, that makes a lot of money, which is ultimately, like I said, what this whole thing is about. So going back and rounding this whole conversation out for this video, in the game of musical chairs, if the Pac-12 and the Big 12 decide to merge, decide to team up, they both land safely on a chair. And so you don't have to be the number 1 conference. I'm not saying you're surpassing the SEC. I mean, honestly, with what the Big Ten's brought and what they could add in the near future, who knows if we're even in the number 2 spot. But bottom line, you're not the odd man out when it comes to this because somebody's going to be left out. And this merger, to me, avoids that scenario for both of these conferences. And the Super Conference would just also be awesome. You don't want to see USC play Baylor. You don't want to see Arizona and TCU go at it on a weekly basis. As a college football fan, you want to see that, okay? So I think everybody potentially wins in this scenario. That's it for us here at The Hard Count. Again, subscribe to the channel, like the video, follow me on Twitter. It's a free country. You don't have to. Might not be a bad move for you going into college football season. We're going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all next time.